In 1952, most healthy males had the choice of either enlisting or being drafted into the military service. I was in my last year of college, and a recruiter came and said, naval aviation is a great field. Only the best can get in.
I'd been in college and over in Evansville going to a business college, and I had worked all the way through high school, and I just sort of got burned out. And I had taken a test at that time, a GS test, to maybe go to Washington, D.C. to work for the government. And I liked 1 point, making good enough that they would guarantee me a job. I could go, but they wouldn't guarantee me until I got there. So when I came out of the testing room where they turned the results test, the Air Force was on the left, Navy was on the right, and I was ready for a change. So I went in and talked to the Navy recruiter and told him I wanted 2 weeks, and I was gone in 2 weeks. So
I was drafted in the Army in 1951, October, after basic training at Fort Riley, Kansas. Then I was sent in to Fort Lawton, Washington, and I got on a ship, went to Japan for processing, then on to Korea. I spent 10 months in Korea on the front lines.
Part-time job after high school was sweeping the floor at the Providence newspaper office, a Journal Enterprise. And the editor had a son, name is Fred Bradley. He's a state senator, Kentucky state senator, but he's also in the Air National Guard at Stanford Field in Louisville. And they had B-57s in 1955. And you could do it then, those days, fly VFR from Stanford to Providence, Kentucky, and did 360s around the city. And I went out and gazed for inspiration. And that inspired me. And I told Mr. Bradley, that was the editor, that I'm going to try to join the Air Force and get into flying. And he said, Fred, his son, Fred Bradley, said, Eddie's got the right idea. So that's what inspired me to join.
Entered service in September of 1952, went through naval aviation training, first at Pensacola and then at satellite bases. After 18 months, I was designated as a naval aviator, and my option was commissioned as a second lieutenant, United States Marine Corps, and then finished my last year of my service as an instructor in the advanced training command for the Navy and the Marines. It was a composite squadron of Navy officers and Marine officers.
When you go in, if you've got college, they guarantee you a school when you get out of boot camp. You don't have to go in just as a regular ship or go on a ship or something. They guarantee you a school. Well, I put down yeoman and personnelman, which were personnel type things, and he said, well, you got to have 3, so they put down journalism. And when I got out of boot camp, I had a set of orders that sent me to Journalism A School, they called it, up there in Great Lakes where I was at boot camp. So I spent the next 4 months up there going to school.
Yeah, I was in the military from 51 to 53. And the Korean War lasted from 50 to the end of 53. So when I was in Korea, it was trying to wind down. They was having peace meetings over in Panmunjom, but they still never did quit fighting until the end, and still I had little skirmishes after that.
I joined the Air Force in August of 1959. My beginning rank was airman. My final rank was lieutenant colonel. I was assigned to B-52s at Kinchlow Air Force Base in Michigan. I was an electronic, now my official title was electronic warfare officer, but about 2,200 hours in the B-52. We were in the Cold War area at that time, where there was always an airborne alert aircraft with nuclear weapons, because the Soviet Union and us were basically enemies at that time.
During my last year, I decided that I would come home and go to law school. I needed to keep flying to earn enough money to go to law school. So there was no Marine Reserve unit anywhere near Kentucky. So I inquired of the Kentucky Air National Guard if they had a slot for me. And fortuitously, their squadron commander was a former Marine. And so he said, come on. And so I joined the Kentucky Guard in December of 1956. We flew F-86s, Saberjet, stayed with the Guard, and then about 1968, I got called back to active duty with the Air Force. Spent a year and a half in Japan and Korea, flying reconnaissance in and near the DMZ in Korea. Continued on after that. I became the commander of the 165th Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron, and while serving in that capacity was appointed Adjutant General of Kentucky by Governor Wendell Ford. Served 6 years as Adjutant General under Ford, and then Governor Julian Carroll. A time that as the Adjutant General, you're commander in effect of the Air Guard, about 1,000 people, and also the Army Guard, which at that time they had 4,700 people. So over 6 years, I learned to speak fluent Army, as well as the Air Force dialogue as well. Following my service as Adjutant General, I served another 5.5 years as National Guard Assistant to the Commander, Tactical Air Command. That's a 4-star bill. The commander of the Tactical Air Command is a 4-star at Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. And at that time, 60 flying units from the Air Guard of reconnaissance and fighters were trained under the responsibility of the Tactical Air Command. So I was the liaison between the Air Guard nationally and the regular Air Force, and did that for 5.5 years. Retired in June 30 of 1983 at the age of 52 or 53. I served 31 years altogether, active and reserve time.
The guys that came back in the 70s, whenever they were walking through the airport and in their uniform and everything, were really mistreated. And I got out in 1967, and we'd been back from Vietnam for my second cruise about 3 months whenever I got back. And at that time, you didn't have the dissension in the United States about the Vietnam War. It was still everybody still believed that it was been going. In the late 60s, early 70s is whenever things started to go for people. And that's the thing that's always bothered me about the guys that served after I did, that were actually in country, in the Army and things like that, is they were there for the same reason that we were. They were told to go there. They were told that they needed to do it.
I mean, I've done about 589 military funerals, and do all kind of honor guard ceremonies anywhere we've needed, parades and all like that for the last 25 or 30 years, especially since I got laid off at the mines at an early age. So I really got active in the honor guard and the color guard then.
The young people today, whenever I was in college and high school, we knew that whenever you got out of high school, there was about 3 or 4 choices that you'd make. Number one was you could go to college. Not everybody went to college then. It wasn't as predominant as it is now. You didn't have a community college here. You had to go away to go to college. Or you got married and had children, or you went into the draft if you were a male, and your chances you could be drafted.
But nowadays, without a draft, it's just a personal opinion of where anybody wants to do that. And I wasn't in the Navy, but they say if you want to see the world, join the Navy. But I was in the Army.
I have had a jillion people tell me I should have stayed in. I should have stayed in. I should have stayed in. If I'd stayed in, I'd already be retired. I should have stayed in. Also, it'll help you grow up.
It's hard to imagine what my life would have been without the opportunity to serve in the military forces. Very proud that I had that opportunity. And as I said, it did more for me than I've done for my country.
While veterans deserving in Kentucky, well, it was a great honor for me to be one of them selected.
I know that I'm in the company of people who are respected and who have done good deeds, probably more than I.
Well, I'm thinking there are a lot of other people that should be far ahead of me in being inducted in the Kentucky Veterans Hall of Fame. And they're all over the place.
It made it a real honor for me that people recognize the fact that people do things just for no particular reason other than just to give back some to what they've been given as they were raised. So
I served a long time. As far as I know, no one ever fired an angry bullet at me. So I was fortunate in that regard. It didn't have to be that way, but it was that way.
It's a recognition of my efforts and what I did in the Air Force, plus what I've done outside of the Air Force.